Hi and welcome to the Archive of History. Imagine standing beneath the burning sun on a vast plateau of golden limestone, where the air shimmers with heat and the sound of 10,000 voices mingles with the ring of copper tools against stone. This is Giza, in the 26th century before the Common Era, and you are about to become part of the most ambitious construction project the ancient world has ever known. You are a builder of the Great Pyramid, the eternal tomb of Pharaoh Khufu, and for the next 20 years of your life, your hands will shape stone that will stand for millennia. This is not a story of slaves driven by whips, but of skilled workers, seasonal laborers, and devoted craftsmen who saw their labor as a sacred duty to their god-king and their civilization. The truth of the pyramid builders has been obscured by centuries of myth and misunderstanding. Greek historians who visited Egypt 2,000 years after the pyramids were built told tales of oppression and slavery that bore little resemblance to the reality. Hollywood films have perpetuated these myths, showing masses of suffering slaves dragging stones under the lash, but the archaeological evidence tells a different story entirely. The workers who built the Great Pyramid were fed with the finest bread, given medical care when injured, and housed in purpose-built villages with their own bakeries, breweries, and sleeping quarters. Their bones, discovered by modern archaeologists, show evidence of healed fractures that were set by skilled physicians. Their tombs, modest but dignified, were built near the very pyramid they constructed, suggesting they were honored for their service rather than worked to death in anonymity. Tonight we will walk with you through every step of this monumental undertaking. We will feel the weight of limestone blocks, taste the dust of the quarries, and know the exhaustion and pride of raising something that will outlast empires. We will experience the rhythm of the Nile's flood, which dictated the annual cycle of construction. We will understand the sophisticated organization that allowed Egypt to mobilize tens of thousands of workers, feed them, house them, and coordinate their efforts with a precision that would impress even modern project managers. We will discover the ingenious techniques developed over generations of pyramid building, the ramps and levers and sledges that allowed human muscle power to move stones weighing several tons. And we will come to know the religious beliefs that made this enormous expenditure of resources seem not just necessary, but sacred. Before we drift off, I am always curious to know where my listeners are tuning in from and what time it is that they are listening tonight. Let me know in the comments. Now let the noise of the modern world fade away. Let the electric hum of modernity recede into silence. Let us travel back more than 4,000 years to the banks of the Nile, to a civilization at the height of its power, and to the greatest building project in human history. Close your eyes and prepare to walk in the footsteps of those who built eternity itself. The world you inhabit is one of extraordinary contradictions. Egypt in the 4th dynasty is a land of abundance and order, yet also a place of backbreaking labor and absolute divine rule. The Nile River is the source of all life, its annual flood depositing rich black silt across the floodplain, creating fields of astonishing fertility in the midst of the desert. Without the Nile, there would be no Egypt. Without Egypt, there would be no pyramids. You were born in a small village along the river's edge, far to the south of the capital at Memphis. Your family has worked the land for generations, growing emmer wheat and barley, tending small herds of goats, and paying your taxes in grain to the pharaoh's officials. The rhythm of your life has always been tied to the river. When the inundation comes each year in late summer, the fields disappear beneath the brown waters, and there is little farm work to be done. This is when the call goes out across the kingdom. The pharaoh needs workers for his eternal house, and able-bodied men are summoned to Giza. You are not a slave. This is important to understand. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing 2,000 years after your time, will claim that the pyramids were built by armies of enslaved people, brutalized and broken by tyrants. But this is not your reality. You are a free man, a farmer who owes labor to the state as part of your civic and religious duty. In return, you will be fed, housed, and treated by physicians. Your family will receive rations of grain while you are away. And when you return home after the season of work, you will carry the pride of having served the living God, the Pharaoh, and helped ensure his successful journey to the afterlife. This is not merely construction. It is an act of devotion, a collective ritual that binds the entire kingdom together in common purpose. The morning you leave your village, the air is cool and filled with the calls of ibises along the riverbank. Your wife has packed a small bundle of possessions for you, a linen kilt, a pair of reed sandals, a wooden comb, and a small amulet of the god Pata, patron of craftsmen and builders. You kiss your children goodbye, their small faces solemn as they watch you. Join the other men from your village at the riverbank. There are perhaps 30 of you, all summoned by the same royal decree. A long wooden boat awaits, its single rectangular sail furled against the mast. The boat is not yours. It belongs to the pharaoh's administration, sent specifically to collect workers from the southern provinces. You climb aboard with the others, finding a place to sit among the coiled ropes and ceramic water jars. The boat smells of fish and tar, and the planks beneath you are worn smooth by countless journeys. As the boat pushes away from the shore, propelled by long oars, you watch your village recede into the distance. The palm trees grow smaller, the white walls of the houses blending into the landscape. You have never traveled this far from home before. The journey to Giza will take you many days, moving slowly against the current of the Nile, which flows from south to north. The boatmen are experienced, their skin dark and weathered from years on the river. They sing work songs as they row, their voices carrying across the water in rhythms that seem as old as the river itself. You sit quietly, watching the landscape pass. The Nile Valley is narrow, a green ribbon of life pressed between the golden cliffs of the desert on either side. Beyond those cliffs lies nothing but sand and stone, a realm of chaos and death. The Egyptians call it the Red Land, and it is the opposite of everything Egypt represents. Here in the black land of the fertile valley, there is order, abundance, and the presence of the gods. Each night, the boat pulls to shore, and you make camp on the riverbank. The process of making camp becomes familiar over the course of the journey, a ritual that marks the transition from day to night. The boatmen are skilled at finding suitable locations, places where the bank is low and accessible, where there is fresh water nearby in the form of a spring or a clean tributary, and where the ground is flat enough for sleeping. They tie the boat securely to trees or stakes driven deep into the mud, ensuring it will not drift away during the night. The river is powerful, even when it appears calm, and a boat that comes loose can be carried miles downstream before morning. The boatmen light fires using bow drills, a technique that requires skill and patience. One man holds a flat piece of wood steady on the ground while another rapidly spins a wooden spindle against it, using a small bow, the string wrapped once around the spindle. The friction generates heat, and with practice and the right materials, a small ember forms in the depression where the spindle meets the base. This ember is carefully transferred to a nest of dry grass and papyrus fibers, which is gently blown upon until it bursts into flame. The flame is then fed with small twigs and gradually larger pieces of wood until a proper cooking fire is established. Over the fire, the crew cooks simple meals. The bread was baked before the journey began and is now somewhat stale, hard and dense but still edible when torn into pieces and chewed slowly. Sometimes the bread is softened by dipping it in water or beer, transforming it into a kind of rough porridge. Onions are a staple, available in abundance and capable of being stored for long periods without spoiling. The boatmen roast them in the ashes of the fire, placing the whole onions directly in the hot coals and leaving them until the outer skin is charred black and the interior is soft and sweet. Peeling away the blackened outer layers reveals the cooked onion inside, steaming and pungent, its sharp bite mellowed by the heat. On fortunate evenings, one of the boatmen catches fish from the river using nets or lines, and fresh fish is added to the meal. The Nile teems with fish of many varieties. Catfish with their long whiskers and smooth scaleless skin, perch with their distinctive stripes and spiny fins, and tilapia that swim in schools near the surface. The fish are gutted with quick, practiced motions, their entrails tossed back into the river to be consumed by other fish, or by the ever-present crocodiles lurking in the muddy water. The cleaned fish are skewered on green reeds or sharp sticks and held over the fire, turning slowly until the skin blackens and crisps and the flesh inside turns white and flaky. The smell of cooking fish mingles with wood smoke, creating an aroma that makes your mouth water with anticipation despite your fatigue. You sleep on the ground each night, finding the least rocky spot you can, spreading your linen cloak on the earth to provide a thin barrier between your body and the hard ground. The cloth offers little cushioning, and you wake each morning stiff and sore, your muscles aching from lying on unyielding earth. But exhaustion is a powerful sedative, and despite the discomfort, you sleep deeply, your body demanding rest after long days on the boat. The sounds of the river at night are extraordinary. a symphony of natural noises that would be alien to someone who has spent their life far from water. Frogs chorus in the reeds, their calls so loud and persistent that they seem impossible to ignore, yet after a few nights you find you can sleep through them, your mind learning to filter out the sound. The frogs call to each other in complex patterns, males announcing their presence to potential mates, their throats swelling and deflating with each croak. There are different species with different calls, some deep and resonant, others high and chirping, all blending together into a continuous wall of sound. The occasional splash announces the presence of larger creatures. Crocodiles slide into the water from mud banks, where they have been basking in the last rays of sunlight, their heavy bodies creating distinctive sounds as they enter the river. Hippopotamuses surface and blow, their breath exploding from their nostrils in loud snorts, and sometimes you hear them calling to each other, deep grunting sounds that carry across the water and seem to vibrate in your chest. These animals are sacred to various gods, but also genuinely dangerous. Crocodiles can grow to enormous size, 15 feet or more in length, and they are opportunistic predators that will attack humans who venture too close to the water's edge. Hippos are even more deadly despite being herbivores, their massive size and aggressive territorial nature making them responsible for more deaths than any other large animal in Egypt. You are careful each evening when you need to relieve yourself, staying well back from the water and watching carefully for any signs of crocodiles basking on the banks. The boatmen have shared stories around the fire, tales of men who were snatched by crocodiles and dragged beneath the surface, never to be seen again, except perhaps as fragments that wash up downstream days later. These stories are not meant to frighten, but to educate, to instill the healthy respect for the river's dangers that is necessary for survival. The nights are beautiful in their way, the sky transforming as the sun sets. First comes the golden hour, when the light turns warm and everything it touches seems to glow. The river becomes molten gold, its surface reflecting the colors of the sky. The palm trees along the banks are silhouetted in black against the brilliant orange and red of the western horizon. Then the colors deepen and darken, the oranges becoming reds, the reds becoming purples, the sky transforming through a spectrum of hues that seem almost unnatural in their intensity. As darkness falls, the stars emerge. In this time before cities with their light pollution, before even oil lamps are common outside of temples and wealthy homes, the night sky is overwhelming in its brilliance. The stars are not mere pinpricks of light, but blazing points that seem close enough to touch, so numerous that they create a luminous background against which the constellations stand out. You recognize patterns that have been pointed out to you since childhood, the stars that make up Osiris lying on his back, the circumpolar stars that never set and mark true north, and the bright star Sopdet, which the Greeks will later call Sirius, whose appearance just before dawn heralds the beginning of the inundation and marks the Egyptian New Year. The Egyptians are expert astronomers, their priests spending countless hours observing the night sky, tracking the movements of stars and planets, using these observations to create calendars and predict the flood. The knowledge is sacred, kept by the priesthood, but shared enough that every Egyptian knows the basic patterns and their significance. The stars are not merely beautiful, they are functional, serving as navigation aids for travelers and as timekeeping devices for a civilization that has not yet invented mechanical clocks. You dream as you sleep under those brilliant stars, dreams that mix memories of home with anxiety about what awaits you at Giza. You dream of your wife, her face appearing to you with perfect clarity even though you have been separated for only days. You see her grinding grain in the stone quern, the rhythmic back and forth motion that transforms whole grains into flour, a task she performs daily, and that has developed the strong arms and shoulders characteristic of Egyptian women. You see your children playing in the dusty lanes between houses, chasing each other in games of tag, or helping with small tasks around the farm, scattering grain for the chickens or fetching water from the canal. You dream of your fields, the small plots of land that your family has worked for generations beyond counting. You see them in different seasons, the black soil freshly revealed by the receding flood waters, rich and soft and ready for planting, the bright green of growing barley and emmer wheat, the young plants standing straight and tall, the golden yellow of the mature grain ready for harvest, swaying in the breeze like waves on water. These fields are your inheritance and your responsibility, the source of your family's sustenance and the foundation of your existence. And you dream of the pyramid, though you have never seen it except in your imagination. built from the fragmentary descriptions passed along by men who returned from previous seasons of work. In your dreams it is impossibly large, a mountain of white stone that reaches toward the sky, its peak lost in clouds. You see yourself standing at its base, so small that you are like an ant before a palace, looking up at the vast geometric perfection of its slopes. You see thousands of men swarming over its surface like ants on an anthill, each carrying a stone or pulling a rope, their movements seeming random and chaotic up close, but revealing a hidden order when seen from above. These dreams are vivid and powerful, often waking you in the pre-dawn darkness, your heart racing and your mind disoriented as you struggle to remember where you are. The transition from dream to waking is jarring, the familiar scenes of your village replaced by the unfamiliar landscape of the riverbank, the sounds of your family replaced by the chorus of frogs, and the rhythmic breathing of the men sleeping nearby. You lie awake in these moments, watching the stars slowly wheel overhead, waiting for the first grey light of dawn to appear in the east and signal the beginning of another day of travel. After many days of steady progress northward, traveling with the current but still needing the oarsman to maintain steerage and prevent the boat from running aground on sandbars or being caught in eddies, the landscape begins to change in ways that signal your approach to the capital region. The river widens, its banks spreading further apart, the channel becoming deeper and more navigable. The settlements along the banks grow larger and more frequent, no longer the isolated villages like your own, but substantial towns with populations in the hundreds or even thousands. You pass towns with names that you have heard spoken but never seen. Beni Hassan, with its cliffs honeycombed with tombs of provincial nobles. Asiut, a major center of trade and administration. Minya, whose temples send incense smoke rising into the sky. Each town is distinguishable by its temples, the most prominent buildings in any settlement, with their massive pylon gates, their courts open to the sky, and their inner sanctums where only priests may enter. The temples are dedicated to different gods depending on local tradition. Anubis, the jackal-headed god of death and mummification, is popular in some regions, Sobek the crocodile god in others, and in still others, Hathor, Thoth, or one of the many other deities that populate the Egyptian pantheon. You pass agricultural estates that dwarf anything you have seen before, vast expanses of fields worked not by individual families, but by large crews of permanent agricultural workers under the direction of overseers. These estates belong to temples or to high-ranking nobles, and they produce enormous quantities of grain that feed the cities and fill the royal granaries. You see work crews in the fields, dozens of men working in coordinated lines, their movements synchronized as they plow or plant or weed. You see irrigation works on a scale that amazes you, not the simple channels and shadows of your village, but complex networks of canals with gates and locks that control the flow of water with precision. The river itself becomes busier, filled with boats of all sizes and types. There are small fishing boats, simple reed rafts paddled by one or two men, their nets spread across the stern ready to be cast. There are medium-sized cargo boats carrying pottery jars filled with oil or wine, bundles of papyrus stalks for making rope and paper, baskets of dates and figs, and all manner of other goods. There are large ceremonial barges, their hulls painted in bright colors and their cabins shaded by linen canopies dyed in blues and yellows, carrying officials or priests or wealthy nobles on journeys between cities. And increasingly, as you draw closer to Memphis and Giza, you see boats dedicated to the pyramid project. Stone barges, massive flat-bottomed vessels capable of carrying enormous weights, laden with limestone blocks from the quarries at Tura on the eastern bank. Timber barges, bringing cedar logs from Lebanon, transported across the Mediterranean, and then up the Nile, the wood necessary for the sledges and rollers and scaffolding that the pyramid requires in vast quantities. Supply boats bringing grain and beer and salted fish to feed the workers, their holds filled with thousands of loaves of bread and hundreds of pottery jars. One morning, just after dawn, when the air is still cool and the light has a peculiar crystalline clarity that makes distant objects appear closer than they are, the boat rounds a long sweeping bend in the river, and suddenly, without warning, there it is. On the western horizon, rising above the low cliffs of the limestone plateau, is a shape that seems to defy nature, to violate the normal rules of reality. The Great Pyramid of Khufu looms against the pale sky like a man-made mountain, its form so perfectly geometric, so precisely triangular that it seems impossible, as if some giant had cut a perfect triangle from the fabric of reality and placed it on the desert plateau. Even from this distance, which must be several miles across the floodplain, you can sense its enormous scale. It dwarfs everything around it, making the cliffs seem small and insignificant, making the palm trees along the river look like mere grass, making the buildings of nearby settlements appear as children's toys. The pyramid dominates the landscape absolutely, drawing the eye irresistibly, asserting its presence with a force that is almost physical. You are not alone in your reaction. Every man on the boat stops what he is doing and turns to look. The oarsmen pause in their rowing, their oars held motionless above the water, dripping. The other passengers from your village and from other towns along the route stand and move to the side of the boat to get a better view. For a long moment, there is complete silence. Every man struck dumb by the sight. Then someone whispers a prayer to Pata and another to Ray, and the spell is broken. But the awe remains, a profound recognition that you are approaching something extraordinary, something beyond normal human experience. From this distance and angle you can see that the pyramid is not yet complete, still under construction after years of work. The lower half, or perhaps 2/3 of its height, is finished, covered in brilliant white casing stones that gleam in the morning sunlight with an intensity that hurts your eyes to look at directly. The whiteness is so pure, so bright, that the pyramid seems to glow from within, as if it were made not of stone but of solidified light. Above the casing, the pyramid is still rough, showing the pale yellow of the core blocks, the internal structure that gives the monument its mass and stability. From here you can see the stepped appearance of the core, each course of blocks creating a horizontal line, thousands of lines stacked one atop another, rising toward the unfinished summit. Around the base of the pyramid, even from this great distance, you can see evidence of activity. There is a haze of dust that hangs in the air, created by the movement of thousands of workers and animals, by the dragging of sledges across stone, by the cutting and shaping of blocks in the quarries. You can see what appear to be long straight lines running from the pyramid in various directions, lighter colored than the surrounding plateau, and you realize these must be the ramps you have heard about, the engineering marvels that allow stones to be hauled to the pyramid's growing height. The boat continues its journey, moving steadily northward, but now you cannot take your eyes off the pyramid. You watch it grow larger. As you draw closer, its details becoming clearer, its true scale becoming more apparent. What seemed like a single uniform mass from a distance resolves into a complex structure, its surface not smooth but textured, made of individual stones that can be distinguished as separate blocks. You see that the casing stones are not simply white but brilliant white, reflecting the sunlight with mirror-like intensity, creating a beacon visible for miles across the desert. After many days of travel, the landscape begins to change. The river widens, the settlements grow larger and more frequent. You pass temples with painted columns, estates surrounded by high mud brick walls, and fleets of fishing boats with their nets spread wide. The air feels different here, heavier with humidity and the scent of lotus flowers. One morning, just after dawn, the boat rounds a bend in the river and you see it for the first time. On the western horizon, rising above the low cliffs of the plateau, is a shape that seems to defy nature. It is not yet finished, but already it is colossal. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, still under construction, looms against the pale sky like a man-made mountain. Even from this distance, you can see the white limestone casing stones on the lower courses, gleaming in the morning light. Above that, the pyramid is still rough, the pale yellow of the core blocks visible where the outer casing has not yet been applied. Around its base, you can see a haze of dust and movement, the activity of thousands of workers like yourself. Your heart quickens. This is what you have come for. This is the work that will define the next months or years of your life. The boat docks at a busy port on the western bank of the Nile, directly across from the city of Memphis. The port is chaotic, filled with boats of all sizes unloading cargo. There are barges laden with limestone blocks, smaller vessels carrying food and supplies, and boats like yours bringing new workers. Overseas move along the docks, checking tallies on papyrus scrolls and directing traffic. You disembark with the other men from your village, following the instructions of a scribe who records your names and assigns you to a work gang. The scribe is young, his head shaved in the style of educated men, his white linen kilt spotless despite the dusty surroundings. He speaks quickly, barely looking at you as he makes his marks on the papyrus. You are assigned to a gang called the Friends of Khufu, one of dozens of crews working on the pyramid. The name fills you with a quiet pride. To be called a friend of the pharaoh, even symbolically, is an honor. From the port, you and your group are led inland, away from the green valley and up onto the desert plateau. The change is immediate and dramatic. Within minutes, the fertile fields and palm groves give way to bare limestone and sand. The heat intensifies, reflecting off the pale stone beneath your feet. You climb a rough path that has been worn smooth by the passage of countless workers and sledges. As you ascend, you begin to see the true scale of the construction site. The pyramid itself dominates everything, but around it is a sprawling complex of workshops, ramps, storage yards, and temporary shelters. There are long mud brick buildings that must be the workers' barracks, open-air workshops where craftsmen shape stone, and massive ramps made of mud brick and rubble that slope upward toward the pyramid's growing height. Everywhere, there is noise. The clang of copper tools on stone, the shouts of overseers directing crews, the creak of wooden sledges being dragged across the plateau, and the deep rhythmic chanting of work gangs hauling blocks up the ramps. The air is thick with limestone dust that catches in your throat and makes your eyes water. You are led to the workers' village, a sprawling settlement of long, narrow barracks built from mud brick. Each building houses dozens of men, sleeping on low platforms along the walls. The buildings are simple but functional, with small windows near the roofline to let in light and air. There is a central courtyard where meals are prepared and distributed, and smaller structures that serve as workshops for tool maintenance and repair. The village smells of sweat, smoke, and baking bread. A steady stream of men moves through the lanes between buildings, some heading to work, others returning, their bodies coated in white limestone dust. You are assigned a sleeping space in one of the barracks, a narrow platform covered with a woven reed mat. There is barely enough room to lie down, and the man next to you is already asleep, snoring softly despite the daylight. You set down your small bundle of possessions and take a moment to absorb your new surroundings. This will be your home for the next several months, possibly longer. The rhythm of work begins immediately. You are woken before dawn on your first morning by the sound of a copper gong being struck in the courtyard. The noise is loud and insistent, echoing off the mud brick walls. Around you, men stir and rise, wrapping their kilts around their waists and splashing water from ceramic basins on their faces. There is little conversation. Everyone is focused on the same goal, getting fed and getting to work. You follow the others to the courtyard, where long lines have formed in front of large ceramic vats. The morning meal is simple but substantial. You receive a round loaf of bread, still warm from the oven, a handful of onions, and a cup of weak beer. The bread is coarse and grainy, made from emmer wheat ground on stone mills, and it contains tiny fragments of stone that grit between your teeth. But it is filling, and you are grateful for it. The beer is thick and nutritious, more like liquid bread than anything you would recognize as beer today. It is slightly sweet and sour at the same time, and it quenches your thirst in a way that water alone cannot. After the meal, you are assembled with your work gang. The Friends of Khufu is made up of about 20 men, all of similar age and physical capability. Your overseer is a stocky man named Amenemhat, whose bare chest is covered in white dust and whose voice carries easily over the noise of the site. He does not carry a whip. This detail is important. The image of pyramid workers being driven by brutal overseers with whips is a myth. Amenemhat is firm and demanding, but not cruel. He understands that the pyramid can only be built through cooperation and sustained effort, not through terror. He explains your task for the day. You will be working in the quarry, extracting limestone blocks from the living rock of the plateau. This is hard, skilled labor, and it requires precision as much as strength. The blocks must be cut to specific dimensions, and any mistakes will result in wasted stone and wasted effort. You follow Amenemhat and the rest of the gang away from the workers' village and toward the quarry. The quarry is a vast open excavation carved directly into the plateau, creating a landscape of step terraces and vertical faces of pale yellow limestone. The sound here is overwhelming. Hundreds of men are working simultaneously, and the air is filled with the sharp crack of copper chisels striking stone, the rhythmic thud of wooden mallets, and the grating scrape of saws cutting through rock. Dust hangs in the air like fog, making it difficult to see more than a few paces ahead. You descend into the quarry, following a narrow path between towering walls of stone. The rock is surprisingly warm to the touch, heated by the sun. The limestone of the Giza plateau is a relatively soft stone, at least compared to granite or basalt, and this is one of the reasons it was chosen for the pyramid. It can be worked with copper tools, though the work is slow and requires patience. Your gang is assigned a section of the quarry face, a vertical wall of stone about 2 meters high. Amenhat shows you how to identify the natural bedding planes in the limestone, the horizontal layers that can be exploited to separate blocks more easily. You are handed a copper chisel and a wooden mallet. The chisel is heavier than you expected, its edge blunt from use. Copper is a soft metal, and it dulls quickly when used to cut stone. Throughout the day, you will need to have it resharpened by the smiths who work in a nearby workshop. Amenhat demonstrates the technique. You position the chisel at an angle against the rock and strike it with the mallet, sending a sharp ringing note through the air. The impact sends a small spray of limestone chips flying. You strike again and again, each blow creating a small divot in the stone. The goal is to create a series of these divots in a straight line, following the natural bedding plane. Over time, these divots will deepen into a continuous groove, and the block will begin to separate from the rock face. The work is monotonous and exhausting. You strike the chisel, adjust your position, and strike again. Your arms begin to ache within the first hour. The sun climbs higher in the sky, and the heat becomes almost unbearable. There is no shade in the quarry, and the white stone reflects the sunlight with blinding intensity. Sweat runs down your back and soaks into your linen kilt. The dust coats your skin and mixes with the sweat, forming a pale paste that dries and cracks. You pause occasionally to drink from a communal water jar that is passed along the line of workers. The water is warm and tastes faintly of clay, but it is life itself. Without it, you would collapse within hours. Around you, the other men in your gang work in similar fashion, each focused on their own section of the rock face. There is a rhythm to it, a steady beat of mallet on chisel that becomes almost hypnotic. Sometimes, one of the men begins to chant, and the others join in. The chants are simple, repetitive work songs that help coordinate the striking and keep everyone moving at the same pace. The words are ancient, passed down through generations of workers, and they speak of serving the pharaoh, honoring the gods, and building for eternity. By midday, your groove has deepened into a trench about a hand's width deep and running the length of the block. Amenhat inspects your work and nods in approval. He shows you the next step. Wooden wedges are hammered into the groove at regular intervals. These wedges are made from acacia wood, cut and shaped specifically for this purpose. Once the wedges are in place, water is poured over them. The wood absorbs the water and swells, exerting tremendous pressure on the stone. Over the course of several hours, this pressure, combined with the weakening effect of the grooves you have cut, will cause the block to crack and separate from the bedding plane. It is a simple technique, but remarkably effective. You watch as Amenhat pours water from a large ceramic jar over the wedges, soaking them thoroughly. The water runs into the grooves and pools at the base of the block. Then you wait. This is one of the strange paradoxes of the work. So much effort is required to cut the grooves, and then you must simply stand back and let nature do the rest. While you wait, you are sent to help another gang that is working on a block that has already been separated from the bedding plane. The block is enormous, roughly rectangular, and weighing several tons. It lies on its side on the quarry floor, still attached to the rock below by a thin layer of stone. Your task is to help undercut this layer, freeing the block entirely. You lie on your stomach on the hot stone, using a small copper chisel to chip away at the underside of the block. The space is cramped and uncomfortable, and you can barely move your arms. Chips of stone fall into your face, stinging your eyes and getting into your mouth. You spit and blink, trying to clear your vision, and continue chipping. It takes the combined effort of 4 men working simultaneously to undercut the entire block. When the final connection is severed, there is a satisfying crack, and the block shifts slightly, now resting entirely on wooden rollers that have been placed beneath it. The freed block must now be dressed, shaped to the precise dimensions required by the pyramid's design. This is the work of the most skilled stone masons, men who have trained for years and can judge measurements by eye with astonishing accuracy. They use copper saws, chisels, and wooden measuring rods to trim the block, removing any irregularities and creating smooth, flat surfaces. You watch them work, marveling at their precision. They move with confidence and speed, their tools striking the stone with practiced ease. The copper saws are particularly impressive, long blades set into wooden frames and used with a back and forth motion. Sand is used as an abrasive, sprinkled along the line of the cut to help the soft copper blade grind through the harder stone. The sawdust that results is a fine, pale powder that coats everything and everyone nearby. When the masons are satisfied, the block is measured one final time and marked with red ochre paint to indicate its intended position in the pyramid. As the afternoon wears on, you return to your own block to find that the wooden wedges have done their work. A long, clean crack has appeared along the line of the groove, and the block has separated from the bedding plane. It is a moment of quiet triumph. You and your gang mates gather around, inspecting the crack and nodding in satisfaction. A menhat praises your work, his tone gruff but sincere. The block will now be undercut and dressed, and then it will be ready for transport. You have completed your first stone. It is one of more than 2 million that will be required to finish the Great Pyramid. But it is yours, and you feel a deep sense of accomplishment. The sun is beginning to sink toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the quarry. The heat begins to ease, and the air cools slightly. The sound of work continues unabated, but you sense a change in the rhythm. Men are beginning to tire, their movements slower, their chants less vigorous. Finally the copper gong sounds again, echoing across the plateau. The workday is over. You climb out of the quarry, your body aching and your skin coated in dust. The walk back to the workers' village feels longer than it did in the morning. Your legs are heavy, your arms throb, and your throat is parched, despite the water you drank throughout the day. But there is also a strange satisfaction, a bone-deep weariness that comes from honest labor. You have spent the day doing something meaningful, something that will last far beyond your own lifetime. In the courtyard of the workers' village, you join the line for the evening meal. Tonight, there is bread again, along with a thick stew made from lentils and onions, seasoned with garlic and cumin. The smell is rich and comforting, and you eat hungrily, barely pausing to breathe. There is also salted fish, a rare treat, distributed in small portions to each worker. The fish is dried and tough, but flavorful, and you chew it slowly, savoring every bite. After the meal, you have a brief period of free time before darkness falls. Some men sit in small groups, talking quietly or playing games with dice made from bone. Others tend to minor injuries, applying poultices of honey and herbs to cuts and bruises. A few visit the small shrine that has been set up at the edge of the village, a simple mud brick structure containing images of the gods Pitta and Hathor. You sit alone for a while, watching the sky turn from blue to orange to deep purple. The first stars begin to appear, sharp and clear in the dry desert air. You think of your family, wondering what they are doing at this moment, whether your children are asleep, whether your wife is thinking of you. Then exhaustion overtakes you, and you return to the barracks, lie down on your reed mat, and fall into a deep, dreamless sleep. The days that follow establish a pattern that will repeat for the duration of your time at Giza. You wake before dawn, eat a simple meal, and report to your assigned task. Some days you are in the quarry, cutting new blocks. Other days you are assigned to transport duty, helping to move finished blocks from the quarry to the pyramid itself. This work is different, but no less demanding. The blocks are loaded onto wooden sledges, flat platforms with runners that allow them to slide across the ground. The sledges are massive, made from thick beams of imported cedar or acacia, and they must be strong enough to bear the weight of stones that can weigh 2 tons or more. The blocks are positioned on the sledges using wooden levers and rollers, a process that requires careful coordination and timing. Once the block is secured, ropes are attached to the front of the sledge, long loops of twisted flax fiber that are rough and harsh against your palms. You take your place among a team of perhaps 20 men, all gripping the same rope. An overseer stands to the side, holding a wooden staff and calling out a rhythm. At his signal, you pull. The sledge does not move at first. The weight is enormous, and it feels as though you are trying to move the earth itself. You lean back, your feet digging into the ground, your muscles straining. The man in front of you pours water onto the ground ahead of the sledge, wetting the limestone surface to reduce friction. This is a crucial detail. The wet stone is significantly more slippery than dry stone, and it makes the difference between movement and futility. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the sledge begins to slide forward. The overseer chants louder, his voice rising and falling in a steady rhythm, and you pull in time with his words. The sledge picks up a slow, grinding momentum. You shuffle backward, step by step, hauling the massive weight across the plateau. The rope burns your hands, even though they are already calloused from weeks of work. Sweat pours down your face and soaks into your kilt. Your legs tremble with the effort, and your breath comes in ragged gasps, but you do not stop. You cannot stop. The rhythm of the chant, the pull of the rope, and the collective effort of the men around you create a kind of trance, a state where pain and exhaustion fade into the background, and you become simply a part of the machine, a single component in a vast system designed to move stone. The journey from the quarry to the pyramid is not long in terms of distance, but it takes hours. The path is relatively smooth, leveled and maintained by work crews, but even small obstacles require enormous effort to overcome. When the sledge reaches a slight incline, the pulling becomes even harder. More men are added to the ropes, and the overseer's chant grows louder and more insistent. You strain against the weight, your vision narrowing to the rope in your hands and the ground beneath your feet. When the sledge finally crests the rise, there is a collective sigh of relief and the pace quickens slightly on the downslope. But you must be careful. A sledge moving downhill can build up dangerous momentum, and men have been crushed when sledges broke free and ran out of control. The overseer and several experienced workers position themselves at the back of the sledge, using wooden brakes and additional ropes to slow the descent. You reach the base of the pyramid, and the sledge comes to a stop. The block will now be hauled up one of the massive ramps that spiral around the pyramid's sides, rising to the level where construction is currently taking place. These ramps are architectural marvels in their own right. They are built from mud brick reinforced with wooden beams and filled with rubble and sand. They slope gently upward, wide enough to accommodate multiple sledges moving side by side, and they are constantly being extended and raised as the pyramid grows taller. The ramps are covered with a layer of wet clay or gypsum to create a slick surface for the sledges. You have seen these ramps from a distance, and they are astonishing. They wrap around the pyramid like the coils of a serpent, rising higher and higher until they disappear into the haze of dust and heat. Hauling a block up the ramp is the hardest work you will ever do. The incline is gentle, only about 10 degrees, but the combination of the weight and the slope makes every step a battle. You and your team position yourselves on the rope once more, and the chanting begins. This time, the overseer is joined by a drummer, a young man who beats out a steady rhythm on a wooden drum. The sound cuts through the noise of the construction site, and it helps to coordinate the efforts of dozens of teams pulling sledges up the same ramp. You pull. The sledge moves a few inches. You pull again. Another few inches. The progress is agonizingly slow. Your hands bleed where the rope has rubbed the skin raw, and you can taste blood in your mouth from breathing too hard. Men around you begin to stumble, their legs giving out from exhaustion. When a man falls, he is quickly replaced by another from the reserve crews that wait at intervals along the ramp. You keep pulling. The world narrows to the sound of the drum, the chant of the overseer, and the burning pain in your muscles. You lose track of time. It could be minutes or hours. All that matters is the next pull, the next step, the next few inches of progress. Finally, you reach the top of the ramp and the current working level of the pyramid. The sledge is maneuvered into position, guided by stone masons who use wooden levers to shift it precisely into place. The block is then lifted off the sledge using a combination of levers and wooden rockers, a technique that allows small teams of men to move enormous weights with surprising control. The block is tipped up onto its edge, pivoted, and then lowered into its designated spot in the pyramid's core. The stone masons check the alignment using plumb bobs and water levels, making tiny adjustments until the block sits perfectly level and flush with its neighbors. When they are satisfied, they step back, and the block becomes part of the pyramid. You have just placed a single stone in a structure that will contain more than 2 million of them. It is a humbling thought, and yet you feel a deep pride. You are building something eternal. From your vantage point on the working level of the pyramid, you can see the entire construction site spread out below. The plateau is a hive of activity. Thousands of men move in organized chaos, hauling sledges, cutting stone, building ramps, and preparing materials. In the distance you can see the Nile, a ribbon of blue-green water cutting through the golden desert. Beyond the river, the city of Memphis rises in a cluster of white buildings and palm groves. It is a breathtaking view, and it reminds you of the scale of what is being accomplished here. This is not just a building project. It is a statement of power, a demonstration of Egypt's ability to marshal resources and coordinate labor on a scale never before attempted. The Great Pyramid is a declaration that Egypt is the center of the world, and that its pharaoh is a god. The work continues day after day, week after week, month after month. The pyramid grows slowly but steadily, each new course of stones rising above the last. The seasons change. The inundation comes, bringing the Nile's flood and a temporary halt to agricultural work across Egypt. During this time, the number of workers at Giza swells dramatically. Men arrive from every province, conscripted for their period of labor service. The workers' village expands to accommodate them, new barracks rising alongside the old. The site becomes even more crowded and chaotic. But the organization never falters. The scribes and overseers manage the flow of materials and labor with meticulous precision, ensuring that no one is idle and that every task is completed efficiently. You come to understand the brilliance of the system. The pyramid is not being built by brute force alone, but by careful planning, division of labor, and a deep understanding of engineering principles that have been refined over generations. As the months pass, you begin to recognize the faces of the men you work alongside. Bonds form, forged in the shared hardship of the labor. There is Seneb, a quiet man from the delta who is the strongest puller of ropes you have ever seen. There is Kamwaset, a young man from your own province who tells jokes to keep morale high during the hardest moments. And there is Neferu, an older man with gray hair and a limp who has worked on pyramids for 3 different pharaohs and who knows every trick and technique for moving stone. These men become your companions, and the work gang becomes something like a family. You eat together, sleep in the same barracks, and rely on each other to survive the brutal demands of the work. When someone is injured, the others cover for him. When someone receives a letter from home, it is shared and celebrated by the entire gang. This camaraderie is what makes the work bearable. You are not alone in your struggle, and that makes all the difference. The food you receive is simple but adequate. The daily ration consists of bread, beer, onions, and occasionally lentils or beans. On feast days, which occur several times a month in honor of various gods or to mark milestones in the pyramid's construction, the rations are supplemented with meat. Cattle are slaughtered and roasted, and the smell of cooking beef fills the air. These feasts are moments of celebration, and the workers gather in the courtyards to eat, drink, and sing. There is a sense of communal joy on these occasions, a recognition that you are all part of something larger than yourselves. The beer flows freely, stronger and more intoxicating than the daily ration, and men laugh and tell stories late into the night. You hear tales of previous pyramids, of the great pharaohs of the past, and of the gods who watch over Egypt. You hear rumors about the interior of the Great Pyramid, the hidden chambers and passages that are being constructed deep within the stone. No one but the highest priests and architects knows the full design, but everyone speculates. Some say there are chambers filled with gold and precious stones. Others say there are magical spells inscribed on the walls to protect the pharaoh's mummy from thieves and evil spirits. You listen to these stories with fascination, wondering what secrets lie within the mountain of stone you are helping to build. The pyramid's interior is indeed a marvel of engineering, though you will never see it. The builders have incorporated a series of passages and chambers designed to house the pharaoh's body and the treasures that will accompany him to the afterlife. The main entrance is on the north face, a doorway hidden behind casing stones that will be sealed after the pharaoh's burial. From the entrance, a narrow passage descends into the bedrock beneath the pyramid, leading to an unfinished chamber that was apparently abandoned in favor of a new design. A second passage ascends from the entrance, climbing upward through the body of the pyramid. This passage leads to a horizontal corridor that opens into the queen's chamber, a misnomer as it was never intended for a queen. Above this, the passage continues upward as the Grand Gallery, a soaring corbelled corridor that is one of the most impressive architectural spaces in the ancient world. At the top of the Grand Gallery lies the king's chamber, the final resting place of Khufu. This chamber is lined with massive blocks of red granite, transported from quarries at Aswan hundreds of miles to the south. The granite blocks are so large and heavy that moving them into position required engineering feats even more impressive than the limestone work you are familiar with. You know about the granite, because you have seen the blocks arriving at the site. They come by barge during the inundation. when the Nile is high and the barges can be brought close to the base of the plateau. Each granite block is enormous, weighing many tons, and they are unloaded using ramps and levers in a process that takes days. The granite is much harder than limestone, and it cannot be cut with copper tools. Instead, it must be shaped using stone hammers and abrasive sand, a process that is incredibly slow and labor-intensive. The granite workers are specialists, men who have trained for years in the techniques required to work this difficult stone. They are highly respected and well compensated, receiving extra rations and privileges. You watch them work with a mixture of awe and envy. Their skills are beyond yours, and you know you will never reach their level of expertise, but you are content with your role. Every worker, from the lowliest rope puller to the master stone mason, is essential to the pyramid's completion. The changing seasons bring different challenges. During the hottest months of summer, the work becomes almost unbearable. The sun beats down with relentless intensity, and the limestone radiates heat like an oven. Men collapse from heat stroke, and the physicians who tend to the workers are kept constantly busy. They treat the afflicted with cool water, shade and poultices made from crushed leaves and herbs. Some men do not recover. Death is not common on the construction site, but it does occur. When a worker dies, his body is prepared for burial according to his means. If he was a man of some wealth, his family may pay for a modest mummification and a burial in a cemetery near the pyramid. If he was poor, his body may be wrapped in linen and buried in a simple grave in the desert. Either way, his death is acknowledged and mourned. The work gangs hold small ceremonies, offering prayers to the gods and pouring libations of beer onto the ground. You attend these ceremonies and feel the weight of mortality. The pyramid is being built to ensure the pharaoh's immortality. But for the workers, death is a constant, unignorable presence. Winter brings relief from the heat, but also new difficulties. The desert nights are cold, and the thin linen blankets provided to the workers offer little warmth. You wake in the darkness shivering, your breath visible in the cold air. The morning meals are warmed with hot water, and the workers huddle around the cooking fires, reluctant to leave the warmth. But the work does not stop. The pyramid must be completed before the pharaoh's death, and no one knows when that will be. Khufu is a powerful man in the prime of his life, but death can come at any time, and the tomb must be ready. This urgency drives the work forward, even in the coldest months. The dust is less oppressive in winter, and the air is clearer. You can see the pyramid shape emerging with greater clarity, its slopes rising at the precise angle of 51 degrees. The geometry is perfect, a testament to the skill of the architects who designed it. The architects themselves are figures of mystery and authority. They rarely descend to the level of the common workers, but when they do, everyone stops to watch. They are dressed in fine linen kilts, their heads shaved, their bodies clean and perfumed. They carry measuring rods and plumb bobs, and they are accompanied by scribes who record every measurement and adjustment. The chief architect is a man named Hemiunu, a relative of the pharaoh and one of the most powerful men in Egypt. You have never seen him up close, but you have heard his name spoken with reverence and fear. He is the mind behind the pyramid, the one who translated the pharaoh's vision into stone. Under his direction, the engineers have solved problems that seem impossible. How do you ensure that a structure this massive remains level and stable? How do you align the sides to the cardinal directions with perfect precision? How do you create chambers and passages inside the pyramid without causing it to collapse under its own weight? These are questions that would baffle most people, but Hemiunu and his team have found answers. Their knowledge is passed down through generations of builders, refined and improved with each new project. You come to appreciate the intelligence and skill that underlie every aspect of the construction. The pyramid is not a random pile of stones, but a carefully planned and executed masterpiece. The core blocks are laid in horizontal courses, each course slightly smaller than the one below, creating the step structure that will eventually be covered by the smooth casing stones. The blocks are not held together by mortar, in the way later buildings will be. Instead, they are fitted so precisely that the joints between them are almost invisible, and the sheer weight of the stones holds the structure together. The casing stones, which will form the smooth outer surface of the pyramid, are made from fine white limestone quarried from Tura on the opposite bank of the Nile. These stones are of much higher quality than the core blocks, and they are cut and polished to a brilliant sheen. When the pyramid is complete and the casing is in place, it will gleam in the sun like a beacon, visible for miles across the desert. The top of the pyramid will be crowned with a capstone, possibly covered in gold or electrum, that will catch the first and last light of each day. This capstone, called the benben, has deep religious significance. It represents the primordial mound that rose from the waters of chaos at the creation of the world, and it symbolizes the pharaoh's connection to the gods. As the pyramid rises higher, the work becomes more difficult. The ramps must be constantly extended and raised, requiring vast amounts of mudbrick and rubble. Some engineers believe that a single massive ramp spirals around the pyramid, while others argue that there are multiple ramps approaching from different sides. You do not know the full design, and perhaps no one except the architects does. What you do know is that the higher you climb, the harder the work becomes.
The air is thinner.
The winds are stronger, and the danger is greater. Men have fallen from the working levels, plummeting to the ground far below. These accidents are rare but devastating. When they occur, work stops temporarily, and rituals are performed to appease the gods and ensure the safety of the remaining workers. You try not to think about the danger, but it is always present in the back of your mind. Every time you ascend the ramp with a loaded sledge, you are aware that a single misstep could be fatal. The pyramid also becomes a place of pride and competition among the work gangs. Each gang is identified by a name painted on the blocks they quarry or transport, and there is a fierce rivalry to see which gang can move the most stone in a given period. The names are written in red ochre or black ink, simple hieroglyphs that declare the Friends of Khufu or the Strong Gang or the Enduring Crew. These inscriptions, hidden within the core of the pyramid, will never be seen by future generations, but they matter to you. They are a record of your existence, a proof that you were here and that you contributed to this great work. When you see your gang's name on a block that has been placed in the pyramid, you feel a surge of pride. You are not anonymous. You are known, at least to your fellow workers, and your labor will be remembered. The social hierarchy on the construction site is complex and well-defined. At the top are the architects and high-ranking officials, men who report directly to the pharaoh. Below them are the scribes, who manage the logistics and record-keeping. Then come the master craftsmen, the skilled stonemasons and carpenters who shape the materials. Below them are the overseers, men like Amenemhat, who direct the work gangs. And at the bottom are the laborers, men like you who provide the raw physical effort. But this hierarchy is not rigid or oppressive. There is a sense of mutual respect and shared purpose. The architects understand that they cannot build the pyramid without the laborers, and the laborers understand that they cannot succeed without the architect's knowledge. This interdependence creates a culture of cooperation, even though the differences in status and privilege are clear. The higher-ranking workers receive better food, more comfortable housing, and higher pay. But everyone is fed, everyone is housed, and everyone is treated by physicians when they are injured. This is a far cry from the brutal exploitation that later generations will imagine. One of the most important aspects of life at Giza is the medical care provided to the workers. The construction site has a dedicated medical facility, a large mud-brick building staffed by trained physicians. These men are not merely healers, but scholars who have studied the human body and the properties of medicinal plants. They treat a wide variety of injuries and ailments, from broken bones and dislocated joints to cuts, burns, and infections. The most common injuries are to the hands and feet, which are constantly subjected to rough stone, heavy weights, and sharp tools. The physicians clean wounds with water and honey, which has natural antiseptic properties, and they apply bandages made from linen. For broken bones, they use splints made from wood or reeds, binding the limb tightly to allow the bone to heal. They also treat internal ailments, using herbal remedies to ease pain, reduce fever, and treat digestive problems. The workers have access to this care at no cost, a benefit that reflects the state's investment in the project. A healthy workforce is a productive workforce, and the administrators understand this well. The physicians also play a role in preventing disease. The workers' village is supplied with clean water from wells and from the Nile, and there are strict rules about waste disposal. Latrines are dug at the edge of the settlement, far from the living quarters and the water sources. The barracks are cleaned regularly, and the sleeping mats are taken outside to air in the sun, which helps to kill lice and other parasites. Despite these precautions, illness is still common. The close quarters and the large number of workers create ideal conditions for the spread of disease, and outbreaks of fever and dysentery occur periodically. When this happens, the physicians work tirelessly to treat the sick and prevent the disease from spreading further. They isolate the afflicted in separate quarters, a practice that prefigures the concept of quarantine, and they administer medicines made from willow bark, garlic, and other plants with medicinal properties. Religion permeates every aspect of life at Giza. The pyramid itself is a religious monument, a sacred structure designed to facilitate the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. But religion is also present in the daily lives of the workers. Small shrines are scattered throughout the construction site, and the workers' village, each dedicated to a different god. Ptah, the god of craftsmen and builders, is especially venerated. His image, a mummiform figure holding a staff, is found in workshops and at the entrances to the barracks. Workers offer prayers to Ptah before beginning their tasks, asking for his blessing and protection. Hathor, the goddess of joy and music, is also popular among the workers. Her shrine is located near the central courtyard, and offerings of bread, beer, and flowers are left there regularly. On feast days, musicians play drums and flutes in her honor, and the workers dance and sing, celebrating the moments of respite from their labor. The pharaoh himself is considered a god, the living embodiment of Horus, the falcon-headed deity who rules the sky. Khufu is believed to be divine, and his will is absolute. The pyramid is being built not just as a tomb, but as a machine for his resurrection. The ancient Egyptians believed that death is not the end, but a transition to another form of existence. The pharaoh's body will be mummified, preserved so that his spirit can return to it. The pyramid will protect his body from decay and desecration, and the treasures buried with him will provide for his needs in the afterlife. The inscriptions and rituals performed within the pyramid will guide his spirit through the dangerous journey to the field of reeds, the Egyptian paradise where the blessed dead live in eternal peace and abundance. To work on the pyramid is to participate in this sacred process. It is to help ensure that the divine order of the universe, the concept of Ma'at, is maintained. If the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife is successful, then Egypt will continue to prosper. The Nile will flood, the crops will grow, and the kingdom will be protected from chaos and invasion. This belief gives meaning to the labor. You are not just moving stones, you are performing a sacred duty that will benefit all of Egypt. As the months pass and you become acclimated to the work and the harsh environment of Giza, you begin to notice subtleties and patterns that were invisible to you during your early days. The work remains brutal and demanding, but your body adapts in ways that surprise you. Muscles that screamed in agony during your first weeks now perform their tasks with something approaching ease, though ease is perhaps too strong a word for labor that involves moving multi-ton blocks of stone up steep ramps in desert heat. Your hands develop calluses so thick that they feel like leather, protective layers that allow you to grip rough ropes for hours without the raw bleeding that characterized your first attempts. Your lungs adapt to breathing air thick with limestone dust, developing a tolerance that allows you to work a full day without the constant choking and coughing that afflicted you initially, though you never fully escape the cough that comes to characterize long-term workers. The social dynamics of the workers' village become clearer as you spend more time there and form deeper relationships with your fellow laborers. The village is not just a collection of individuals serving their time and then departing, but a community with its own culture, hierarchies, and traditions. There are men who have been here for years, permanent workers who know every aspect of the construction process and who hold informal authority based on experience and skill rather than official position. These veterans are treated with respect by newer arrivals, their advice sought, their opinions valued. They know which overseers are fair and which are harsh, which tasks are most dangerous and which are merely difficult, which physicians are skilled and which are incompetent. The workers develop friendships and rivalries, alliances and feuds, the normal social patterns that emerge whenever humans live in close proximity for extended periods. Some men become inseparable companions, working together, eating together, spending their limited free time together. Others maintain a more solitary existence, fulfilling their duties but keeping largely to themselves, perhaps out of preference, or perhaps because their personalities make forming friendships difficult. Rivalries between work gangs sometimes escalate beyond the healthy competition, encouraged by the administrators, leading to fights that must be broken up by overseers, and occasionally resulting in injuries that send men to the medical facility. The evenings in the workers' village, after the day's labor is done and the meal has been eaten, take on a particular character that varies with the seasons and with the moods of the workers. In winter, when the desert nights are cold, Men gather around fires built in the courtyards, huddling close to the flames for warmth and companionship. Stories are told, the same stories repeated countless times but never losing their appeal. Tales of previous pyramids, of the great pharaohs of the past, of the gods and their interactions with humans. Stories of accidents and near misses, of blocks that almost fell and crushed workers but were caught at the last moment, of men who survived falls that should have been fatal. And ghost stories, tales of spirits that haunt the construction site, the vengeful khas of workers who died and were not properly buried, or the protective spirits of ancient gods who watch over the sacred work. In summer, the evenings are more languid, the heat persisting long after sunset, the mud brick walls of the barracks radiating back the warmth they absorbed during the day. Men sit outside rather than huddling indoors, spreading reed mats on the ground and lying under the stars, talking quietly or simply resting in silence. The conversations turn to home, to families left behind, to crops that are being planted or harvested by others, to children growing up without their fathers present. These conversations are tinged with melancholy, with longing for a life that seems increasingly distant and abstract. Music is an important part of evening life in the village, providing entertainment and emotional release that makes the hardships more bearable. Some workers are skilled musicians who brought simple instruments from home or fashioned new ones from materials available at the site. There are drums made from pottery jars covered with stretched leather, producing deep resonant sounds when struck with the hands. There are flutes carved from reeds or bone, their haunting tones carrying across the desert night. And there is singing, men joining together in songs that range from work chants to love songs to hymns praising the gods. The singing is not refined or sophisticated. These are working men, not professional musicians, but it is heartfelt and sincere, expressing emotions that might otherwise remain bottled up and unexpressed. The feast days that occur several times each month, marking religious festivals or construction milestones, are highlights that break up the monotony of routine labor and provide something to look forward to during the hardest times. These feasts are elaborate by the standards of the workers' village, though modest compared to the celebrations enjoyed by the wealthy. Cattle or sheep are slaughtered specifically for these occasions, the animals driven up from farms in the valley or from temple herds, their throats cut in ritual fashion by priests who ensure the slaughter is done according to religious law. The meat is roasted over large fires in the courtyards, the smell of cooking beef or mutton filling the air and creating an atmosphere of celebration and anticipation. The distribution of meat is carefully managed to ensure fairness, with each worker receiving a portion appropriate to his status and role. The most skilled craftsmen and the work gang leaders receive slightly larger portions, recognition of their greater responsibility and value, but everyone receives some meat, even the lowest-ranked laborers. The meat is supplemented with extra bread, with vegetables prepared in various ways rather than simply raw, and with stronger beer than the daily ration, beer that contains more alcohol and provides not just nutrition but genuine intoxication. These feasts transform the atmosphere of the village, at least temporarily. The constant tension and fatigue that characterizes daily life lifts, replaced by something approaching joy. Men laugh more readily, joke more frequently, engage in playful wrestling matches or impromptu races that would be unthinkable during normal work periods. The dancing is particularly memorable, men forming circles and moving in rhythmic patterns passed down through generations, stamping their feet and clapping their hands in time with drums, their movements growing more energetic and less coordinated as the strong beer takes effect. You participate in these celebrations with genuine enthusiasm, allowing yourself to relax and enjoy the moment, to forget temporarily the hardships and the homesickness and the exhaustion that define so much of your existence here. You eat roasted beef, the meat rich and fatty and delicious beyond description, after months of simple bread and lentils and onions. You drink the strong beer, feeling it warm your belly and loosen your inhibitions, bringing a pleasant fog to your thoughts. You dance with your fellow workers, moving in patterns that feel ancient and primal, your body responding to rhythms that seem to bypass conscious thought and tap into something deeper. But these moments of celebration are brief, mere interludes in the larger pattern of sustained labor that is the true character of life at Giza. The morning after a feast day brings a return to normal routine, the gong sounding before dawn as always, the bread and weak beer distributed in the courtyard, the work gangs assembling and marching out to their assigned tasks. If anything, the work seems harder on these mornings. bodies sluggish from the previous night's indulgences, heads aching from too much strong beer, the contrast between celebration and labor making the return to routine feel like punishment. As the seasons cycle through their eternal pattern, you witness the inundation multiple times, the annual miracle that makes Egypt possible. Each year around the time of the summer solstice, the Nile begins to rise, swelling beyond its normal banks as floodwaters from distant Ethiopian highlands make their way north to the Mediterranean. The rise is gradual at first, the water level increasing by inches each day, lapping higher on the banks, covering the lowest fields. Then the rise accelerates, the river spreading across the entire floodplain, transforming Lower Egypt into a vast shallow sea, with only the highest ground and the towns built on artificial mounds remaining above water. During the inundation, when agricultural work is impossible because the fields are underwater, the workforce at Giza swells dramatically. Farmers from across Egypt arrive to fulfill their labor obligations, bringing the total number of workers to its highest levels. The workers' village expands to accommodate them, new temporary barracks constructed from mud brick, rising seemingly overnight to house the influx. The site becomes even more crowded and chaotic. The paths between buildings thronged with men, the courtyards packed during mealtimes, the quarries and ramps swarming with labor. This annual surge in workforce allows the most ambitious construction tasks to be undertaken, projects that require sheer numbers of workers pulling together. Particularly large stones can be moved, ramps can be extended by dozens of feet, entire courses of the pyramid can be completed in the space of a few months. The acceleration is dramatic, visible week to week as the pyramid rises higher and takes on more of its final form. But the crowding also brings challenges. Disease spreads more readily when thousands of men are living in close proximity, sharing water sources and latrine facilities. Arguments and fights become more common, the friction of too many people in too small a space igniting tempers that might otherwise remain controlled. When the inundation recedes, which happens gradually over the course of a couple of months starting in late autumn, the seasonal workers return to their villages to plant crops in the rich new soil left by the flood. The workforce at Giza shrinks back to its core of permanent workers and those serving longer terms like yourself. The site becomes less crowded, the atmosphere more relaxed, the pace of work necessarily slower with fewer hands available. This seasonal rhythm, dictated by the Nile's annual cycle, becomes a fundamental pattern of your existence, a natural clock that measures time in floods rather than in months or years. The relationship between the workers and the project's administrators evolves in complex ways as the construction progresses. Initially, when you first arrived, the scribes and overseers seemed almost like different species, educated men from a world completely foreign to your experience as a farmer. But prolonged contact reveals their humanity, their own struggles and frustrations, their own investment in the project's success. You come to recognize individual scribes by sight, to know which ones are meticulous and fair in their record keeping and which ones are careless or corrupt. You learn which overseers genuinely care about the workers' welfare and which ones see the workforce as merely tools to be used up and discarded. Amenhat, your overseer, falls into the former category, and over time you develop something approaching respect and even affection for him, despite his gruff exterior and his demanding expectations. You come to understand that his harshness is not cruelty, but rather a form of caring, a recognition that the work is dangerous and that mistakes can be fatal, and that maintaining discipline and focus is essential for keeping men alive. You see him argue with higher-ranking officials on behalf of his gang, demanding better tools or additional rest periods or medical attention for injured workers. And you see the toll the responsibility takes on him, the weight of knowing that men's lives depend on his decisions, visible in the lines deepening on his face and the gray spreading through his hair. The spiritual dimension of the work deepens as you spend more time at Giza and come to better understand the religious beliefs that undergird the entire enterprise. The pyramid is not merely a construction project, but a sacred undertaking, a physical manifestation of theological principles that are central to Egyptian civilization. The shape of the pyramid itself, a perfect triangle rising to a point, represents the primordial mound that emerged from the waters of Nun at the creation of the world, the first solid ground where the Creator God stood to begin the work of making all things. By building a pyramid, you are symbolically recreating that act of creation, participating in the eternal struggle to maintain Mat against the forces of Isfet. The priests who visit the construction site regularly to perform rituals and make offerings at the various shrines scattered throughout the complex embody this religious dimension. They are educated men who have studied in temple schools, who know the sacred texts and the proper forms of ritual, who serve as intermediaries between the workers and the gods. They lead prayers at the beginning of each workday, asking for the gods' blessing and protection. They perform purification rituals when accidents occur, cleansing the site of any pollution caused by blood or death. And they conduct the more elaborate ceremonies that mark significant milestones in the construction, such as the completion of a major phase or the placement of particularly important stones. You participate in these rituals with genuine devotion, understanding that they are not empty formalities, but essential actions that maintain the cosmic order. When you bow your head and recite prayers to Potter, asking for his guidance as you work stone, you are not merely following routine but engaging in a spiritual practice that connects you to the divine. When you make offerings of bread or beer at the shrines, leaving them to be consumed by the gods or by the priests who serve as the gods' representatives, you are acknowledging your dependence on divine favor and your place in a universe ordered by forces beyond human control. The pyramid itself becomes, in your imagination and in the collective imagination of all the workers, something more than a physical structure. It is a gateway between worlds, a bridge between earth and sky, between the mortal and the divine. The passages and chambers hidden within its mass, which you have helped to construct though you have never seen them completed and furnished, are pathways for the pharaoh's spirit to travel from his burial chamber deep within to the stars above. The pyramid's perfect alignment to the cardinal directions, achieved through astronomical observation and sophisticated surveying, connects it to the cosmic order, making it a kind of machine for ensuring that the universe continues to function as it should. This understanding transforms the labor from something merely difficult to something meaningful on a profound level. You are not just moving stones, you are participating in a cosmic drama, playing your small part in maintaining the order of the universe. This belief sustains you through moments of doubt and exhaustion, provides purpose when the pain and hardship threaten to overwhelm your determination, and it creates a bond among the workers, a shared sense of participating in something sacred that transcends the mundane realities of dust and sweat and aching muscles. Your own spiritual life deepens during your time at Giza, shaped by the constant proximity to the sacred work and by the regular participation in rituals. You develop a personal relationship with Ponta that goes beyond the generic prayers recited by everyone, addressing him in your thoughts as a kind of father figure or mentor, asking for his guidance in specific situations, thanking him when tasks go well, seeking his comfort when they do not. The amulet you wear around your neck, the small faience image of Ponta that your wife gave you before you left home, becomes precious beyond its material value, a tangible connection to the divine and to your family simultaneously. You also develop practices of personal devotion that are not required or even necessarily encouraged by official religion, but that feel necessary and right to you. In the evenings after work, you sometimes walk out into the desert beyond the workers' village, finding a quiet spot away from the crowds and the noise, and sit watching the sun set over the western desert. These moments of solitude become a kind of meditation, a time to process the day's experiences and to reconnect with yourself beneath the accumulated dust and exhaustion. You watch the colors change in the sky, the brilliant oranges and reds and purples that seem almost impossible in their intensity, and you feel a sense of connection to something larger than yourself, a peace that is rare and precious in the chaos of the construction site. During these solitary moments, you think about your family with an intensity that is almost painful. Your wife's face appears in your mind with perfect clarity, though you know that memory is fallible and that the image you carry may no longer perfectly match the reality of her appearance. Has she aged during your absence? Are there new lines on her face, new silver threads in her hair? You imagine your children growing taller, your eldest son developing the muscles and competence of approaching manhood, your daughter becoming a young woman, your youngest son growing from toddler to child. You have missed years of their lives, years you will never get back, and this knowledge weighs on you. But you also know, with a certainty that requires no justification, that your absence has purpose and meaning. You are not away from your family for frivolous reasons or personal ambition, but because you are serving the pharaoh and the gods, fulfilling your sacred duty to help maintain Maat. This service benefits not just Khufu but all of Egypt, ensuring that the cosmic order is preserved, that the Nile continues to flood, that crops continue to grow, that your family and all families can continue to exist in a world of order rather than chaos. This understanding does not eliminate the pain of separation, but makes it bearable, transforms it from mere suffering into meaningful sacrifice. Letters arrive occasionally from home, carried by merchants or travelers who pass through your village, and then make their way to Memphis and eventually to Giza. The letters are not written by your wife, who cannot read or write, but by the village scribe who records her words on scraps of papyrus in exchange for a small payment in grain or beer. The letters are brief, constrained by the cost and by the limits of what can be expressed through an intermediary, but they are precious nonetheless. They tell you that your family is well, that the children are growing, that the crops have been good or poor depending on the year, that your wife thinks of you and prays for your safe return. You receive perhaps half a dozen of these letters over the years you spend at Giza, and you keep each one carefully. The papyrus rolled and tied with cord, stored among your few possessions in the barracks. You have them read to you multiple times by men who can read, listening to your wife's words conveyed through the scribe's formal phrases, trying to hear her voice behind the text, to feel her presence through the writing. And you compose return letters, going to one of the scribes at the construction site and paying him a small portion of your wages to record your words and arrange for delivery. You tell your wife that you are well, that you are eating adequately, that you are doing important work, that you think of her and the children constantly, and that you will return home when your service is complete. You try to describe the pyramid, to convey its scale and magnificence, but you know that words are inadequate, and that she cannot truly understand what you are experiencing. These letters, both received and sent, become focal points of emotional life, occasions for reflection on what has been lost and what remains, on the sacrifices being made and the purposes they serve. The arrival of a letter from home can lift your spirits for days, providing motivation to continue even when the work seems unbearable. The absence of letters, the long periods when no word arrives and you begin to fear that something terrible has happened to your family, brings a different kind of suffering, an anxiety that gnaws at you and makes concentration difficult. The workers develop their own informal economy within the official structures, trading skills and favors, buying and selling small items, creating a micro-society with its own rules and customs. Men who have particular skills beyond simple labor offer services for payment in kind. A worker skilled at sharpening tools keeps chisels and saws in good condition in exchange for portions of food or small favors. A man who can read and write offers to compose letters home for workers who are illiterate, accepting payment in beer or bread or occasionally in small copper pieces. A skilled barber cuts hair and shaves heads and faces, maintaining the clean-shaven appearance that Egyptians prefer, and that helps to prevent lice, accepting whatever payment his customers offer. Gambling is prevalent despite being officially discouraged. Men playing games of chance with dice made from bone or pottery, wagering portions of their rations or small personal items. The games are played in the evenings or during brief rest periods, hidden from the sight of overseers who might confiscate the dice and impose minor punishments. The gambling creates its own dramas, men winning and losing, debts accumulating and being paid off or disputed, occasionally escalating into arguments that must be resolved by unofficial arbitration or by fights. Sexual tensions are inevitable in a community composed almost entirely of men separated from their families for extended periods. Official policy strictly forbids prostitution or any other form of sexual commerce, and women are not allowed in the workers' village except for the few who work in the bakeries and breweries and who are carefully chaperoned. But human nature finds ways around restrictions. Some workers develop romantic or sexual relationships with each other, partnerships that are not discussed openly but are known and generally tolerated as long as they remain discreet and do not interfere with work. Others occasionally slip away to nearby settlements where women may be available for payment, risking punishment if caught, leaving the site without permission. The isolation from women and family creates a particular emotional landscape, a kind of suspended existence where normal life is put on hold and replaced by this temporary community focused entirely on a single purpose. Friendships formed in this context take on an intensity that might not develop under normal circumstances. The shared hardship and the absence of other emotional outlets creating bonds that will last a lifetime for some men. You find yourself becoming closer to Seneb and Kenwaset and Old Neferu than you ever were to neighbors in your village. The experience of building the pyramid together creating a connection that transcends normal social boundaries. But this intensity has its shadow side as well. The constant proximity without privacy, the inability to escape from men who annoy or anger you, the accumulation of small grievances over months and years. All of this creates potential for explosive conflict. Fights break out periodically, usually over trivial matters that become magnified by the stress and confinement. A perceived insult, an accusation of stealing food, a dispute over sleeping space, any of these can trigger violence that requires intervention by overseers, and sometimes results in injuries serious enough to require medical attention. The administrators deal with these incidents pragmatically, separating the combatants, assigning them to different gangs if necessary, occasionally imposing punishments in the form of reduced rations or assignment to particularly unpleasant tasks. As the pyramid rises higher and higher, approaching completion after years of sustained effort, there is a growing sense of anticipation mixed with a strange melancholy. The workers have invested so much of themselves in this project, have defined themselves in relation to it, that its completion represents not just achievement but also loss. What will come after? What will give meaning and purpose to their lives when the pyramid is finished and they return to their former existences? These questions haunt many workers, including yourself, as the end of the project comes into view. But you also long for home. You miss your family, your village, the quiet rhythms of agricultural life. The work at Giza is meaningful, but it is also exhausting and relentless. You dream of the day when you will return to your fields, to the familiar routines of planting and harvest. That day finally comes when the inundation ends and the floodwaters recede. The call goes out for seasonal workers to return to their homes, and your name is on the list. You are given a final ration of food, a small payment in grain, and a certificate written on papyrus that records your service. This certificate is important. It is proof that you have fulfilled your duty to the pharaoh, and it will exempt you from future conscription. You say goodbye to the men you have worked alongside, knowing that you may never see them again. There are embraces, promises to remember each other, and a shared sense of accomplishment. You have been part of something extraordinary, and that bond will remain with you for the rest of your life. The journey home is long, but it feels shorter than the journey to Giza. You travel by boat once again, watching the landscape of the Nile Valley pass by. The green fields are rich with new growth. The result of the recent flood. Farmers are at work, planting seeds and tending to their crops. It is a scene of peaceful productivity, and it fills you with a deep sense of contentment. When you finally arrive at your village, you are greeted with joy and celebration. Your family has been waiting for you, and they rush to meet you at the riverbank. Your children have grown, and they stare at you with wide eyes, as if you have returned from another world. In a sense you have. You have been to Giza. You have worked on the Great Pyramid. You have touched stones that will stand for millennia. Your wife embraces you, and you feel the tension and exhaustion of the past years begin to drain away. You are home. In the days that follow, you return to the rhythms of village life. You work in your fields, planting barley and emmer wheat. You tend to your goats and repair the walls of your house, but you are not the same person who left. You have seen things that few people will ever see. You have been part of a project that defies imagination. When your neighbors ask about your time at Giza, you struggle to find the words to describe it. How do you explain the scale of the pyramid, the organization of the work, the camaraderie of the laborers? How do you convey the weight of a 2-ton block of stone, the sound of 10,000 men chanting in unison, the sight of the pyramid rising against the sky? You do your best, but you know that your words are inadequate. Some experiences can only be understood by those who lived them. Years pass. Your children grow into adults and have children of their own. You grow old, your body marked by the scars of your labor. Your hands are gnarled and calloused. Your back is bent, and you walk with a limp from an old injury that never fully healed. But you are content. You have lived a good life, and you have contributed to something that will outlast empires. When you die, you will be buried in a simple grave in the desert near your village, your body wrapped in linen, your few possessions placed beside you. You will not have a grand tomb like the pharaoh, but you do not need one. Your immortality is already secured. It is there in the stones of the Great Pyramid, in the blocks that you quarried and hauled and placed with your own hands. Future generations will marvel at the pyramid and wonder how it was built. They will create myths and legends about its construction. Some will claim it was built by giants or by visitors from the stars. But you know the truth. It was built by men like you, ordinary people who did extraordinary things. The Great Pyramid of Khufu will stand for more than 4,000 years. It will survive the collapse of the Old Kingdom, the invasions of foreign armies, and the passage of countless dynasties. It will be the tallest man-made structure in the world for nearly 4 millennia, until the construction of medieval cathedrals in Europe. It will be stripped of its gleaming white casing stones, which will be repurposed for buildings in Cairo, revealing the rough core blocks beneath. But even in its diminished state, it will remain a monument to human ambition and ingenuity. The secret chambers inside, the king's chamber with its granite sarcophagus, the grand gallery with its soaring corbelled ceiling, will be explored by archaeologists and treasure hunters. They will find that the pyramid was robbed in antiquity, its treasures stolen, and the pharaoh's mummy desecrated. But the structure itself will endure, a silent witness to the power and sophistication of ancient Egypt. For you, the pyramid is more than a monument. It is a testament to the value of labor, the importance of cooperation, and the human capacity to achieve the impossible when united by a common purpose. It is a reminder that greatness is built slowly, one stone at a time, through the accumulated efforts of countless individuals. The pyramid was not created by a single genius or a divine miracle. It was created by the sweat and skill of thousands of workers, each contributing their small part to the whole. This is the lesson of the Great Pyramid, and it is a lesson that resonates across the millennia. When you look back on your life, you do not remember the pain or the exhaustion. You remember the pride, the camaraderie, and the sense of purpose. You remember the moment when your block was placed in the pyramid, becoming part of something eternal. You remember standing at the top of the working level, looking out over the Nile Valley, and feeling that you were at the center of the world. The pyramid is a symbol of many things. It is a symbol of the pharaoh's power, of Egypt's wealth, and of the ancient world's engineering prowess. But it is also a symbol of the workers who built it, of their dedication and their sacrifice. The inscriptions hidden in the core, the names of the work gangs written in red ochre, are a testament to their existence. They remind us that history is not made only by kings and generals, but by ordinary people who do extraordinary work. The Great Pyramid is their monument as much as it is Khufu's. It is a monument to the human spirit, to the belief that with enough determination and effort, anything is possible. This belief is what drove you to the quarries day after day, what gave you the strength to haul sledges up the ramps, what allowed you to endure the heat and the dust and the exhaustion. And this belief is what makes the Great Pyramid not just a tomb but a timeless symbol of human achievement. As you lie in your bed in your final days, you close your eyes and you can still see it. The pyramid rising against the sky, its white casing stones gleaming in the sun. You can still hear the chanting of the work gangs, the ring of copper on stone, the creak of the sledges. You can still feel the rope in your hands, the ache in your muscles, the satisfaction of a job well done. The pyramid is no longer just a distant structure on the horizon. It is a part of you woven into the fabric of your being. You helped to build it, and in doing so, you built something within yourself. You became more than a farmer from a small village. You became a builder of the eternal, and when you take your last breath, you do so with the knowledge that your life had meaning, that your labor had purpose, and that you were part of something greater than yourself. The Great Pyramid of Khufu stands today on the Giza plateau, weathered by time but still magnificent. Tourists from around the world come to see it, to marvel at its size, and to wonder at the civilization that created it. They take photographs and listen to guides who tell them about the pharaoh and the architects and the engineering techniques. But few of them think about the workers, the men who actually moved the stones and built the structure. Few of them imagine the quarries, the sledges, the ramps and the back-breaking labor that went into every block. Few of them understand that the pyramid was not built by magic or by aliens, but by human hands, human sweat and human determination. If they could, they would see the names written on the blocks in the core, the marks of the work gangs that have survived for thousands of years. They would see the evidence of the workers' village, the barracks and workshops and medical facilities that have been excavated by archaeologists. They would see the proof that the pyramid was built by a well-organized, well-fed and well-cared-for workforce, not by slaves but by citizens performing their duty to the state and the gods. The story of the pyramid is ultimately the story of Egypt itself, a civilization that achieved greatness through organization, innovation, and the collective efforts of its people. The Old Kingdom, the era when the pyramid was built, was a time of stability and prosperity. The pharaohs commanded the resources of the entire Nile Valley, and they used those resources to create monuments that would declare their power to the world. But that power was not based on oppression or tyranny. It was based on a social contract, an understanding that the people would serve the pharaoh, and the pharaoh would ensure Ma'at, the cosmic order that brought prosperity and stability. This contract was not always fair, and it certainly favored the elite over the common people. But it was effective, and it allowed Egypt to flourish for thousands of years. The pyramid is a physical manifestation of this contract, a testament to what can be achieved when a society is united by shared beliefs and common goals. For you, lying in your bed in your final moments, the pyramid is a source of comfort. You know that your body will decay and return to the earth, but the stones you placed will remain. They will stand as a monument, not just to Khufu, but to you and to all the workers who labored alongside you. They will stand as proof that you existed, that you mattered, and that you contributed to something that will outlast the ages. This is the true meaning of immortality. Not the preservation of the body in a grand tomb, but the creation of something that endures, something that carries your mark into the future. The Great Pyramid is your legacy, and it is a legacy you share with thousands of others. Together you built a wonder of the world, together you defied the impossible, and together you ensured that your names, even if forgotten by history, are written in stone for eternity. And so our journey through the sands of ancient Egypt comes to an end. We have walked in the footsteps of the pyramid builders, felt the weight of the stones, and shared in the struggle and the triumph of their monumental task. The Great Pyramid stands today as a testament to their labor, a reminder that human beings, when united by purpose and guided by vision, can achieve the extraordinary. The workers who built the pyramid were not slaves, but free men who saw their labor as a sacred duty. They were fed, housed, and cared for by a state that understood the value of their contribution. They were organized into efficient work gangs, guided by skilled overseers and architects, and they labored with pride and determination. Their names are hidden in the stones, invisible to the casual observer, but present nonetheless a silent testimony to their existence. The pyramid is their monument as much as it is Khufu's, a symbol of human ingenuity, cooperation, and endurance. As the years of your life pass after your return from Giza, the pyramid becomes a kind of touchstone in your memory, a reference point against which other experiences are measured and often found wanting. The dramatic events of daily life in your village, the small triumphs and disappointments, the cycles of planting and harvest, all seem somehow smaller and less significant compared to the grandeur of what you participated in at Giza. This is not to say that your life at home is unhappy or unfulfilling, far from it. You take deep pleasure in watching your children grow into capable adults, in seeing your grandchildren born and begin their own journeys through life. You take satisfaction in working your fields, in coaxing food from the black soil left by the Nile's annual flood, in the simple rhythms of agricultural existence that have sustained your family for generations. But there is a part of you that remains at Giza, a part that never fully returned home. In quiet moments, when you are alone in the fields, or sitting outside your house in the evening, watching the sun set over the western desert, your mind drifts back to those years of extraordinary labor. You remember specific moments with a clarity that surprises you, given how much time has passed. You remember the first time you successfully cut a block free from the bedrock, the satisfying crack as the stone separated from the bedding plane, the approval in Amenemhat's eyes. You remember the burning pain in your muscles as you hauled sledges up the ramps, the rope cutting into your hands, the chanting of the work gang providing rhythm and meaning to the suffering. You remember the taste of the evening stew after a long day's work, the simple lentils and onions and garlic seeming like a feast because of your hunger and exhaustion. You remember your companions, the men who became like brothers to you through shared hardship. Seneb, whose strength was legendary, who could pull a sledge almost single-handedly when needed, whose laugh was as loud as his voice, and whose loyalty was absolute. You heard that he continued working at Giza for many more years after you left, eventually rising to become an overseer himself, though you never saw him again to confirm this. Khaim was Set, the young man from a village near yours, who kept spirits high with his jokes and songs even during the hardest moments, whose optimism seemed unquenchable. He returned home around the same time you did, and you saw him occasionally over the years at regional markets or festivals, and each time you met you would talk about Giza, sharing memories that had become precious to both of you. And old Neferu, the veteran of 3 pharaohs' pyramids, whose knowledge was encyclopedic and whose patience in teaching young workers was infinite. You learned later that he died at Giza, his damaged lungs finally giving out, and that he was buried in the workers' cemetery near the pyramid, an honor he would have appreciated. As you age, as your body accumulates the wear of decades of hard labor, both at Giza and in your own fields, you find yourself thinking more and more about mortality and legacy, about what endures after death and what is lost. The pyramid represents permanence in a way that few other human creations do. Your house will eventually crumble, your fields will be worked by others, your name will be forgotten after a few generations. But the pyramid will stand, the stones you placed will remain in position, and in that sense, you will have achieved a kind of immortality. This thought brings you comfort as your body fails and you know that your time is growing short. The pyramid's true significance, you have come to understand over the years, is not just as a tomb for Pharaoh Khufu, though that was its explicit purpose. It is not just as a demonstration of Egypt's power and organizational capability, though it certainly serves that function. The pyramid is a statement about human potential, about what can be achieved through collective effort, guided by vision and sustained by determination. It is a rejection of the idea that humans are small and insignificant, a declaration that we can create works that rival the mountains, that will outlast empires, that will speak to distant futures we cannot imagine. When you die peacefully in your sleep after a long and full life, your family prepares your body for burial according to their means and the customs of your region. You are not wealthy enough for elaborate mummification, the expensive process involving the removal of internal organs, the treatment of the body with natron salts, and the wrapping in many layers of linen that is reserved for the elite. But you receive a respectful preparation nonetheless. Your body is washed and anointed with scented oils, wrapped in clean linen, and placed in a simple wooden coffin. Your precious possessions are buried with you, the certificate from Giza proving your service, now yellowed and fragile but still legible, the amulet of Potter that protected you throughout your time at the pyramid, the carved scarab that old Neferu gave you, and a few other items that marked important moments in your life. You are buried in a modest tomb on the desert edge near your village, a simple chamber cut into the rock of the low cliffs that mark the boundary between the black land of cultivation and the red land of the desert. The tomb is not elaborate, just a rectangular chamber with a vaulted ceiling and walls of bare rock, but it is sufficient. Your family performs the necessary rituals, pouring libations of water and beer over your wrapped body, placing offerings of bread and onions and dried fish that your ka can consume in the afterlife, speaking your name aloud so that it will be remembered. A priest from the local temple of Ptah comes to recite prayers and perform the opening of the mouth ceremony, the ritual that symbolically restores your senses so that you can eat and drink and speak in the afterlife. Your tomb is sealed with a stone slab, and over the entrance, a stone stela is erected bearing your name, your titles, and a brief prayer to Osiris asking for your acceptance into the field of reeds. The stela is modest, carved by a local craftsman rather than a master sculptor, but the hieroglyphs are clear and correct. Among your titles, carved into the stone for eternity, are the words Builder of the House of Khufu, identifying you as one who worked on the Great Pyramid. This designation fills your family with pride and ensures that your service will be remembered by your descendants, at least for a few generations until the tomb is forgotten and the stela weathered beyond reading. The years pass, becoming decades, becoming centuries. Your tomb remains sealed and undisturbed, protected by its remoteness and its lack of valuable grave goods that might attract tomb robbers. Your mummy, such as it is, desiccates in the dry desert air, the natural environment preserving your body far better than any artificial process could. The stela at your tomb's entrance weathers slowly, its hieroglyphs becoming shallower, harder to read, but remaining visible to anyone who looks closely. Your descendants live and die, and eventually, the knowledge of your tomb's location is lost, your name forgotten, your existence reduced to a sealed chamber in the desert and a few bones wrapped in ancient linen. But the pyramid endures, standing on the Giza plateau exactly as it did in your lifetime, virtually unchanged by the passage of time. The pyramid enters its golden age after your death, serving its purpose as Pharaoh Khufu's tomb. Khufu dies, perhaps a decade or two after you return to your village, and his body undergoes the most elaborate mummification process imaginable, taking 70 days and involving the work of the most skilled embalmers in Egypt. His internal organs are removed and placed in canopic jars, except for his heart, which remains in his body, because the heart is the seat of intelligence and personality and will be needed in the afterlife. His body is treated with neutron salts that draw out all moisture, turning the flesh into something like leather, preserved and unchanging. He is wrapped in hundreds of cubits of the finest linen, each layer separated by prayers written on papyrus and amulets of gold and precious stones that will protect him on his journey through the underworld. The funeral procession that carries Khufu's mummy from the Valley Temple up the long causeway to the pyramid is the most elaborate ceremony Egypt has ever seen. Thousands of mourners line the route, wailing and throwing dust on their heads in ritual expressions of grief. Priests walk before the coffin burning incense and reciting prayers. The royal family follows, dressed in white linen, the color of mourning. Musicians play drums and flutes, the somber music echoing across the plateau. When the procession reaches the pyramid, Khufu's mummy is carried through the entrance on the north face and up through the ascending passage and the grand gallery to the king's chamber, where it is placed in the massive red granite sarcophagus that has waited for years for this moment. The burial chamber is filled with treasures beyond imagining, chests of gold and silver, jewelry encrusted with precious stones, furniture of ebony inlaid with ivory, jars of perfumed oils and unguents, baskets of food and jars of beer to sustain the king in the afterlife, and thousands of other items that demonstrate his wealth and power. The walls of the chamber are inscribed with spells from the pyramid texts, hieroglyphs of power that will guide Khufu's spirit and protect him from the dangers of the underworld. When the burial is complete and all the rituals have been performed, the entrance to the burial chamber is sealed with granite blocks weighing many tons each, designed to be immovable and to protect the king's resting place from violation. The pyramid stands complete, its smooth white casing stones gleaming in the sun, visible for miles across the desert and the Nile Valley. At its peak, a capstone covered in electrum, an alloy of gold and silver, catches the first rays of dawn and the last rays of sunset, making the pyramid appear to glow at the beginning and end of each day. The ancient Egyptians call it Ket Khufu, Khufu's horizon, a name that captures its purpose and its appearance, the place where earth meets sky, where the mortal king becomes an immortal god. For centuries, the pyramid fulfills its purpose, standing as Egypt's most prominent monument, a constant reminder of the power of the Old Kingdom and the glory of the Fourth Dynasty. But nothing lasts forever, not even in Egypt. The Old Kingdom eventually collapses, a victim of climate change that reduces the Nile's floods and causes widespread famine, political infighting among powerful nobles who challenge royal authority, and the simple entropy that affects all human institutions over time. The collapse is not sudden but gradual, taking place over decades, as central authority weakens and provinces become increasingly independent. During the period of chaos that follows, known to historians as the First Intermediate Period, the pyramid is violated by tomb robbers who somehow find a way past the sealed entrance and the massive granite blocks. They steal the treasures that were buried with Khufu, melting down the gold and silver, prying the precious stones from their settings, taking everything portable and valuable. They destroy Khufu's mummy in their search for amulets and jewelry wrapped in the linen bandages, scattering the royal remains with the casual brutality of men who see only profit and have no reverence for the dead. When the Middle Kingdom restores order to Egypt several centuries after the Old Kingdom's collapse, investigators enter the violated pyramid and find the king's chamber empty except for the granite sarcophagus, which was too massive for the thieves to move. Khufu is gone, his body destroyed, his treasures stolen, his eternal rest disturbed. The violation is a tragedy, but the pyramid itself survives, and that survival is its own kind of victory. The thieves took what was portable, but they could not take the pyramid. They stole the gold, but they could not steal the achievement, the statement in stone that humans made about their own capability and determination. Over the following millennia, the pyramid witnesses the rise and fall of Egyptian civilization through all its phases. It stands through the Middle Kingdom, watching as new pyramids are built by later pharaohs, though none as grand as itself. It stands through the New Kingdom, when Egyptian pharaohs abandoned pyramid building in favor of hidden tombs in the Valley of the Kings. But when the Great Pyramid remains Egypt's most iconic monument. It stands through the Late Period, when Egypt is conquered by Assyrians, Persians, and finally by Alexander the Great and his Greek successors, the Ptolemies. It stands through the Roman period, when Egypt becomes a province of a Mediterranean empire, and the ancient religion is gradually suppressed in favor of Christianity. The pyramid's casing stones, its brilliant white exterior, are gradually removed over centuries, taken by various rulers and builders who see the pyramid not as a sacred monument, but as a convenient quarry of pre-cut stone. Much of medieval Cairo is built with limestone taken from the pyramid's casing, the stones that you and countless other workers hauled up ramps and placed with such care. By the time of the Islamic conquest of Egypt in the 7th century AD, most of the casing is gone, revealing the stepped core blocks beneath. The pyramid is smaller now than it was when completed, shorter by about 30 feet, its smooth sides replaced by rough steps, but even diminished. Even stripped of its gleaming exterior, it remains impressive, the largest stone structure on Earth, a monument that commands respect by its sheer mass and its obvious age. The medieval Arabs who rule Egypt are fascinated by the pyramid, and they develop elaborate legends about it. Some claim it was built by antediluvian giants, before the Great Flood described in religious texts. Others claim it contains the wisdom of the ancients, libraries of books written on gold plates or carved into the walls containing knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and magic that has been lost to the modern world. Still others claim it contains vast treasures that remain hidden in secret chambers that have never been found. These legends persist, growing more elaborate with each retelling, and they will eventually reach Europe and inspire centuries of speculation and treasure hunting. When European explorers and archaeologists begin studying the pyramids systematically in the 18th and 19th centuries, bringing scientific methods and careful measurement to their investigations, they are astounded by what they find. The precision of the construction exceeds anything they expected. The base is almost perfectly level, varying by less than an inch across its width of more than 750 feet. The sides are aligned to the cardinal directions with an accuracy that can barely be detected even with modern instruments. The slope of each face is consistent to within fractions of a degree over a height of more than 400 feet. The internal passages and chambers demonstrate sophisticated understanding of structural engineering, with corbelled galleries and relieving chambers that distribute weight and prevent collapse. The scientists and scholars study the pyramid exhaustively, measuring every dimension, calculating its volume and mass, analyzing the types of stone used and where they came from, trying to understand how it was built and why. They excavate the workers' village and discover evidence that overturns centuries of assumptions. The workers were not slaves but paid laborers. They were fed well, with meat and beer provided regularly. They received medical care when injured, with evidence of healed fractures that were set by skilled physicians. They lived in purpose-built housing and were buried in cemeteries near the pyramid with honor. These discoveries revolutionize understanding of ancient Egypt and of the pyramid's construction. In the core blocks, archaeologists find the inscriptions that workers like you left behind. Gang names written in red ochre and black ink, the Friends of Khufu, the Followers of the Strong Crown, the Enduring Gang, the Great Gang. These names are photographed and catalogued, and they become part of the scholarly record. Proof that the pyramid was built by organized teams of workers who took pride in their labor and wanted their existence recorded. The inscriptions are your signature, your proof of existence, and they survive into the 21st century, visible to anyone who can access the interior of the pyramid, a connection across 4,000 years. Modern visitors come to Giza by the millions, tourists from every nation on Earth, drawn by the pyramid's fame and its status as one of the few surviving wonders of the ancient world. They arrive in buses and cars, they take photographs with cameras and phones, they listen to guides who explain the pyramid's history and construction using microphones and speakers. They climb the rough exterior where the casing stones have been removed, though this is technically illegal and authorities try to prevent it. They enter the interior through passages that were cut by grave robbers in medieval times, crawling through narrow spaces to reach the grand gallery and the king's chamber, marveling at the corbelled ceiling and the empty granite sarcophagus. Most of these visitors know nothing about you. Never think about the workers who built the pyramid. Focus instead on the pharaoh and the architects and the supposed mysteries of construction. But some visitors, a few, pause to think about the human cost and human achievement. They imagine the quarries and the ramps, the rope teams and the chanting, the years of sustained labor that transformed bedrock into a geometric mountain. They wonder about the workers, what their lives were like, what motivated them, whether they understood the significance of what they were building. And in those moments of imagination and empathy, you live again, your existence acknowledged, your labor recognized, your contribution to human achievement celebrated. The pyramid will stand for millennia more, though it continues to erode slowly from wind and sand, from the occasional earthquake that shakes the region, from the simple passage of time that wears down even the most durable stone. Eventually, in some distant future measured in tens of thousands of years, it will collapse entirely, reduced to a mound of rubble that barely suggests the precise geometry it once possessed. But that future is so distant that it might as well be infinite, and for now and for countless generations to come, the pyramid endures, standing as testament to what you and thousands like you achieved. Your legacy is woven into the stones of the Great Pyramid, permanent and enduring, even though your name has been forgotten and your tomb lost. The pyramid is your monument as much as it is Khufu's, perhaps even more so, because Khufu provided the vision and the resources, but you provided the labor, the sweat, the skill, the sustained effort that transformed vision into reality. The pyramid declares to every generation that sees it that humans are capable of extraordinary things, that we can create works that outlast empires and speak across millennia, that through cooperation and determination we can achieve the impossible. As we stand in imagination at the pyramid 4,000 years after you helped build it, looking up at its weathered but still magnificent slopes, we carry your story with us. We understand now that the pyramid was not built by magic or by aliens or by slaves driven by whips, but by free workers who saw their labor as sacred duty, who were fed and housed and cared for by a state that understood their value, who took pride in their work and left their marks in the stone. The pyramid is theirs, is yours, and it stands as eternal proof that you existed, that you mattered, that your life had meaning and purpose. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the sands of ancient Egypt, for walking with the pyramid builders and experiencing their world through their eyes. We have shared in their labor, felt their exhaustion and their pride, known their companionship and their dedication to a purpose larger than themselves. We have come to understand that the Great Pyramid is fundamentally a human achievement, created by people like us through determination and cooperation, and that understanding makes it even more remarkable, even more inspiring than any myth or mystery ever could. As you drift off to sleep tonight, imagine the desert wind moving across the Giza plateau, carrying with it the echoes of ancient voices, the chanting of work gangs pulling ropes in perfect rhythm, the ring of copper tools on stone, the shouts of overseers coordinating complex choreography, the quiet prayers whispered to Pa before beginning each day's labor. Imagine the pyramid as it once was, gleaming white in the Egyptian sun, its capstone of electrum blazing like a star, a beacon visible for miles, announcing to the world that here stands something eternal, something that will outlast all of us. Imagine yourself among the workers, one stone cutter among thousands, one rope puller among tens of thousands, one small part of a vast collective effort. Feel the rope in your hands, rough against your calluses, taste the limestone dust coating your throat, hear the rhythm of the chant guiding your efforts, and know that your contribution, however small it might seem, is essential to the whole. That without you and thousands like you, the pyramid could not exist. Dream tonight of ancient Egypt, of a civilization at the height of its power, of skilled workers building for eternity. Dream of the Nile in flood, its brown waters spreading across the valley, releasing farmers from their fields to serve their pharaoh. Dream of the desert plateau at dawn, the air cool and clear, the pyramid rising against the pale sky, promising to stand forever. Dream of the satisfaction that comes from honest labor, from being part of something greater than yourself, from creating something that will outlast your name and your memory, but carry forward your mark into distant futures you cannot imagine. May you rest well tonight, and may you carry with you the understanding that human achievement is not the province of pharaohs and architects alone, but is built on the labor and dedication of ordinary people doing extraordinary work. May you remember that every great structure is built one stone at a time, that every long journey is completed one step at a time, that sustained effort can accomplish what seems impossible. May you sleep peacefully, knowing that the past speaks to us through monuments like the Great Pyramid, reminding us of our capacity for greatness when we work together toward common goals. Sleep now, and dream of builders and their stones, of rivers and deserts, of pyramids and eternity. Dream of a world 4,000 years gone but still present in memory and stone, still speaking across the millennia, still declaring that humans can create, can build, can achieve, can leave marks that endure long after we ourselves have turned to dust. Good night, and may the spirit of the ancient builders inspire you to your own acts of creation and achievement, however modest they may seem, knowing that all great things are built slowly, deliberately, one small contribution at a time, by ordinary people doing what seems impossible until it is done.